Welcome to the BC Search and Rescue Association's AdventureSmart Expert Webinar Series. Tonight, we have Richard Vincent and Danielle Laurent from Leave No Trace Canada.
Our first guest this evening, Richard Vincent, brings a lifetime of experience to Leave No Trace from the private and public sectors. As a retired outdoor educator, he pioneered innovative outdoor pursuits programs in Alberta and Nova Scotia that set the stage for those who followed. His outdoor interests include interpretation and many involvements with youth programming, not the least of which is leading canoe trips down the North Saskatchewan River and in the backwoods of Nova Scotia. He has authored curriculum guides for the Nova Scotia Department of Education and worked on many boards and committees related to youth in sport and the community. Richard's co-host this evening, co-presenter, I should say, is Dan Laurent. He's retired from the Canadian Armed Forces after 17 and a half years of service as a military police officer. Dan was deployed to Op Athena in Afghanistan in 2008 and has been fortunate enough to be able to have seen coast to coast to coast while serving. He's currently the education chair for Leave No Trace Canada and supported by a committee of dedicated volunteers throughout the country. Leave No Trace's goal is to provide information to instructors and interested people of Leaving No Trace principles while in the front and the backcountry. You're in good hands tonight, both with Richard and Dan, and I'd like to hand over the stage, the virtual stage, to both of you. And thanks for joining us this evening.
Hey, thank you very much, Sandra, and good evening, everybody. Let's see if we can get our screen up here and get this show going for you. So here we are, a national organization, and thanks to Sandra and the team presenting to you tonight on Leave No Trace. And here's the question: do you leave no trace when you're venturing outdoors? Is it possible to leave no trace? Are there things we should all be doing more of that we're not doing right now? Let's have a chat and see where we land on this. Thank you tonight to our supporting partner, Coleman Canada, and you'll learn more about our partners and how we function as an organization in the coming slides. So welcome, everybody. Our mission is pretty straightforward: promote and inspire responsible outdoor recreation through science-based education and partnerships. Now that's shifting a bit as we find more and more groups are going outside in what you might call an educational situation. So responsible outdoor activity is becoming more the norm. And we have a lot of teachers and educators as part of our program, and that'll come up in a few minutes as well. We've been active in Canada since 2005, and we offer our services through a series of authorized providers across the country. In British Columbia, for example, Hope Mountain Center is our authorized provider. We are active in more than 50 countries. Some of those are relatively small operations or investments, but some of the more major ones would be our mothership in the United States, Ireland, New Zealand, Japan, and there are some more coming on as we speak. We receive no government funding. Everything we get right now is coming from our supporting partners and members, and we do reach all coasts with our partnerships. You'll recognize some of these here, I'm sure. Notably, some of these are more in the education and youth arena, but excuse me, more recently, we've ventured into tourism as there's a lot of interest there as guests and visitors to various areas and facilities are having an impact as like never before, all of which largely came a result from the pandemic. You'll notice here there's quite a range, everything from the backcountry horsemen of British Columbia through magazines, and of course, Subaru Canada is one of our lead sponsors, the Tourism Industry Association of the Yukon, and there's many more. It varies, but right now we have between 50 and 70 partners. Our major partner at the moment has made the most significant investment in Leave No Trace would be Subaru Canada, where they're sponsoring the Leave No Trace pledge. Have any of you seen this yet? I hope so. We've now accounted for more than 3,000 trees being planted from those who took the pledge, where you visit our website and with a few clicks, you agree to take part or to practice the Leave No Trace principles. And when you share that commitment, Subaru agrees to plant a tree. So there we are, we're up to 3,300 and counting. Our core function remains education and training, but we do through 3 different levels. We have an exciting new pilot underway in Ontario that's I'm sure is going to spread to the rest of Canada. And that will be our level 1 youth program, where we have now trained over 50 teachers in Ontario in how to teach Leave No Trace to their high school students. We often find that with Leave No Trace, the association is about managing waste. Leave no trace, don't leave anything behind, right? Well, it is more than that. It's more than pack it in and pack it out. It's more than making sure you leave a neat campsite and pick up your trash. Let's have a look at some of the larger part of Leave No Trace. Excuse me, we talk a lot about impacts. I'm sure these are scenes familiar to a lot of you. You've seen situations with trash outdoors. You've seen situations with trail degradation for all kinds of reasons. Trail grading, for example, there on the right. Which would you rather experience when you're outdoors? I think I know the answer from my end anyway. So we're a guiding set of principles, not rules. We're not the trail police. We're not out there telling people what to do. We're there to help folks understand the where and the why of how to minimize our impact as we venture forth. And we do get into not just ecological, but social impacts as well. Notably, through Principle 7, we consider it to others. And we'll get to the principles just a second. It used to be that it was only backcountry, front country situations that Leave No Trace came into play. But now we're finding that many organizations are looking to Leave No Trace in urban situations, parks, schoolyards even. So here's our principles. And I think with AdventureSmart, one in particular stands out, and that would be Principle 1. So important for all kinds of situations outdoors. Planning ahead, as you know, in winter involves all kinds of things to think about if you're going to be out there and be safe. And not just winter, of course, but planning ahead means not just making sure you know where you're going and is it open or closed or like that. It's planning to minimize our waste while we're out there, planning to minimize our impact, and are we doing all we can to make sure that those who follow where we're headed will enjoy a similar experience. So let's work through some of the principles and talk about how they may impact our experience outdoors. And I'll ask Dan to jump in here and add to this section of the presentation. Dan, would you like to talk about Principle 1 for a bit?
Yeah, so for Principle 1, it's knowing the regulations for each park or each location you're going to. Some parks are pack it in, pack it out regards to human waste. So there's not the ability to have thunderboxes or places to use the facilities. It's you pack in a bag and you're bringing it out with you. The big thing in the wintertime, it's something to think about because that human waste doesn't decompose like it would during the summer or spring. So you're always leaving a trace of some sort. So it's, packing it out or really trying to mitigate the impact that you're doing on the environment. The weather and special conditions, again, having a VHF radio with you when you're out in the backcountry to know whether or not there's a snow squall or a thunderstorm coming. That way you can change up your plan, let whoever you've left your trip plan with, know that you're changing that plan and moving forward. And again, group considerations. Obviously, the bigger the group, the more impact you're going to have on the environment. But that's all considerations you're going to have to make when you're developing your plan and preparing.
Great, thanks, Dan. And I'm sure many of you have been through situations where you may have wished you'd taken this, that, or the other piece of gear. And of course, we all chalk that up to experience and move forward. But planning ahead and preparing for the experience outdoors, whether it's your local park where you're leading a group perhaps, or somewhere deep in the backcountry, so important. Knowing the local regulations, what's happening in that particular week or day. Of course, right now with the wildfire situation being what it is across Canada, what's your situation with open fires? Are they allowed or not? Are you using fire pits or stoves, or what's your situation going to be? Lots of seasonal things to think about. And of course, if you're going into an area where there are no trails, what are some of the restrictions that might be in play? Durable surfaces, camping and traveling. We all know what they are, or do we? Staying on the trail is so important. We often have come, I'm sure we've come across situations where you've seen trails that went across switchbacks, for example, which can lead to serious erosion issues and the need for downstream maintenance, making more work for other people. Staying on the trail is a big part of who we are, and camping on surfaces that are suitable for tents and reasonable levels of impact, using campsites that are designated or that have already been used and set up rather than starting new ones. There's a lot to this. And when you take a Leave No Trace course or a more in-depth awareness session, we'll talk a lot more about all of these principles. But what is a durable surface? This is really important because I find that a lot of folks have different ideas about what is durable, and a lot of times it'll depend on the variable. For example, let's have a look at which of the following might be considered a durable surface. How about snow? Would you agree that is durable? Well, yes, it is, especially if you've got 8 inches or more. If it's only a light dusting, of course, not so. But if you've got some snow depth there, you can easily walk across that and have no impact on what's below. So that's the one situation where you might be able to go off trail. Dry pine needles, yes, again, pretty straightforward there, as are the others that you're going to see here. The one that comes across quite often is the muddy situation, the pool of water in the middle of the trail. And I know, I have to admit, I have walked around it. I've got to say it. But most of the time now that I know more about Leave No Trace, I'm wearing pretty good footwear, and I will go through the puddle rather than creating a new trail or enhancing a trail that someone else has already made around the edge and going around it. Trails can get really large in those kinds of situations. Dry grass here too should be checked, because there's certainly situations where dry grass is acceptable as a durable surface. Dan, have you ever gone off trail?
I have gone off trail, and not intentionally.
Not intentionally, yeah.
The trail was in disarray, and we actually had to go around the trail to get around the obstacle. So we did have to go around the trail, but we reported it to the park to get fixed up. And yeah, it happens, but it's just something that you have to be cognizant about, that you need to stay on the trail as best you can.
As best we can, that's right. So here we go with the one that is most often associated with Leave No Trace. How do we dispose of waste? Well, we're talking about the trash we might generate, and whether it's a 1 hour or a 1 week situation. How do we deal with human waste, pet waste. As we know, dogs are a big issue in Canada and have been for some time, and how dog waste is managed. Food waste, and of course, our gray water and soaps. So we've got our, maybe a banana with us, or an apple, or an orange, you name it. What is the big deal with throwing this into the woods? It's organic, isn't it? Well, I'm gonna switch over to Dan here again for some comment on that.
Yeah, regardless if it's organic, it's not natural to that area. It changes the environment. Let's use the orange for instance. It's acidic. That plant matter that's sitting beside it is not used to having that acidity, so potentially it's going to kill that plant. And just environmentally, it's not good. It's not going to be good for the environment. It's not going to be good for the area that you're wanting to stay in, and it attracts animals in the end, right? So food waste, you want to keep it in a stasher bag or some sort of bag of some sort to bring back with you.
Point taken. And with things like apple cores and that, they may attract animals to trail areas or to areas that are heavily habituated by humans, whether it's maybe it's provincial park campground even, and it may put those animals at risk for predation. It may put the humans at risk for nips and whatever else. Not a good situation overall. Yes, if you can carry it in, you can carry it out. Absolutely. However, that's not always the case, as our hardworking park staffer here is looking at on a Monday morning after the groups have left. Of course, we also recommend the use of dirt bags where you can put in your dog waste in their little bag, or anything else that is really trashy. Seal that up and put it in your pack, and there's no harm done, out it goes. We talk a lot in Leave No Trace about human waste and how to dig cat holes and manage that waste. I'm not going to go into it all here today, except to say that there are ways we can do it. More challenging in rocky area and hard standings, no doubt about that. There's certainly areas in heavy use areas that would be in the States now, where everything has to come out. And you've got to find a way to remove your human waste. The Colorado River has been doing it for years, and I won't be surprised to see some areas in Canada that are so popular where there is an issue, where that's going to become the norm. We've done some work with the Yukon tourism associations, and up there it is quite an issue, and they're doing their best and working with new ways to address the problem of human waste. Principle 4, leave what you find. Have you found some pretty neat things when you're out walking? I know I have, and there's some pictures of them right there. We are definitely not in favor of seeing the rock cairns and the nukshucks put up. When you're removing rocks from where they are, you're disturbing what's underneath them that has a function in the ecosystem, especially with streams. Plus, they may be misleading, and if you're above tree line, I'm in situations where nukshucks are being used as trail markers by the land management in some way. You don't want to be putting them up there and confusing people unless they're clearly being used to mark a trail. Painted rocks, generally we don't support these being in our environment. I do appreciate that painted rocks are often put there for very sincere and emotional reasons, and be that as it may, the acrylic paints on these things, it does break down over time and does have an impact on the environment in a small way. For sure, it's a small way, but it's there. How do you deal with wild edibles? Well, you're going to leave some for the next person, or you're going to clean out the patch. I'll let you address that, but we certainly appreciate that wild edibles are used for wildlife as well. This moose head down here on the left, if you look closely at the lower end at the tip of the jaw there, you can see where it's been nibbled away by little animals there in that setting. And this was actually found in a national park out in my part of the world, on the East Coast. But you can see how these are important to what's already there, namely small animals. They rely on this source of calcium as part of their diet. And of course, over time, they do break down, as do antlers and such. The rest of it, leaving structures behind when you're using the campsite, unless it's a group campsite where that's accepted part of the picture, we don't recommend it. We like to find a campsite in a natural state when we get there. Likewise with fossils, leaving them there for others to enjoy and discover. So our time is moving along here, and I don't want to, I could spend an hour talking about campfires and fire impact because there's so much to it. But I mentioned fire bans earlier on, and Dan, how many stoves do you have in your collection?
I've got 5.
5. I know I've got about that many as well, and I'm not using them all, but I've got them. And so certainly with stoves now being the answer for a lot of situations in the backcountry, and open fires becoming harder and harder to apply and enjoy, this is really an important principle. In fact, some of our partners prefer minimize fire impact because even when you say minimize campfires, it sort of implies that they might be allowed. But if you are allowed to have a campfire and you are able to collect some wood for it, just you notice there on the list, there are 4 Ds. Wood should be down, dead, dinky, and distant. That is not right there at the campsite. Make sure that if you're using wood, that it's being collected from the area around the site. Also in the picture, you see there lower left, a mound fire. I have to admit, I've never done one of those. They are employable in some situations. Dan, have you ever used one?
I've never used it. I've only seen it in use.
Right. You have to be careful with those because you can create, just by digging up and scooping up dirt to create the mound, you may do more damage than it's worth. But I put it in there because when you're done, you use it and you pack it all up and you carefully spread the dirt back where it came. There's no trace of you being there. And of course, also existing fire rings are quite are often allowed in various jurisdictions. So some alternatives that we've seen used that do leave no trace, the 2 elevated fire platforms on either side. You can see the suppliers there if you're interested. These are really cool and work very well in damp or snow conditions. If, assuming you're not in a pile of powder, 6 feet of snow, if you can get down a bit and get these stabilized, the stainless mesh one there on the right can work really well. And it's a lot easier to use in the winter, and that's very lightweight to pack that particular one. The Primus is quite heavy. And the one in the middle, it's made by a friend of mine. It's just a little colander that's put down on a durable surface. And you can have a fire in there very quickly and efficiently that's quite concentrated and focused. And I find with these colander fires and fires of those type, you can generally boil cold water in about 8 minutes or so. I've got $5 here in Halifax that says you've seen these situations when you've been outside. It's very difficult to burn waste in a fire, and then it can make more of a mess than we'd like to admit, I guess, sometimes. But again, this is not uncommon these days, and it's so important to get rid of this stuff and bring it out with you if you've taken the trouble of packing it in. The fire site there on the right was in a wilderness area here in Nova Scotia. That has since been cleaned up, but people will burn a lot of different things if they can find them, including green branches. Not what we like to find. Principle 5, respect wildlife. Dan, you had any bear encounters?
I have.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I kept my distance, made lots of noise, made sure he knew I was there. I didn't go up and pet him or anything like that, but we definitely kept our distance.
Yeah, I'm sure. I haven't had any bear encounters recently. I had many as a young person in Alberta, but there are a lot of bears here in Nova Scotia, but not in the areas where I'm hanging out right now. So we've got guidelines about how close you should be to wildlife and how you view it and enjoy it. The pictures there are of wildlife that have run into situations. The eagle has a fishing line around its one of its talons, and PPE is not as the big deal that it was, but we have a researcher here at Dalhousie University that did a lot of work on this internationally and found that a lot of wildlife got strung up like this little mallard here, and a very difficult situation to deal with. And of course, fishing line again, maybe you've seen the collection bins at some of the key spots. Those happen to be in New Brunswick, where wildlife group has put those out to encourage folks to put that away, because nothing worse than seeing a bird tied up with some kind of a situation like this. Looking after your food, your bear canisters, dealing with all types of things is so important. All types of wildlife is so important. Off-leash dogs. We find that a lot of folks don't realize that wildlife sees dogs as a predator, as something that's really off-putting for them. And I can show you areas that I frequent where there are a lot of off-leash dogs and the wildlife is totally gone. And maybe there's some situations that our participants today would relate to on this. So principle 7, we're not the only users. Multi-use trails may now include motorized vehicles, horses, bicycles, of course. What am I leaving anything out? I don't think so. The sign there's got Bigfoot on the trail. I don't think I've come across any of those guys, but of course we all know Bigfoot leaves no trace anyway. But shared use trails are where this really comes into play, along with perhaps public campsites where you know there's other folks around. And how can you best get along with other trail users and know the trail guidelines and make sure that everybody has a positive experience outdoors? This is a principle that always generates discussion, sometimes controversy. Who does have the right of way on a trail, and how best to deal with situations where you're head to head with a motorized vehicle and maybe things aren't going so great, and how to minimize those situations and make sure everybody is able to enjoy their day and carry on. I guess the other thing that comes up a lot is the noise factor outside. Of course, where there's a family out there or a group, it's only natural that we want to engage with each other. But speaking from my experience, I've heard lots of groups outside from a long distance away, especially across a lake or coming up the trail that we're going. You know they're coming because you can hear them, or the dog might be barking or whatever. So we recommend and try to encourage folks to enjoy nature sounds and keep the noise down, unless, of course, you're out there with Dan in bear country, where noise is a good thing. One of the points that's in here that I think I'm going to take out is consider the color of your clothing. And this is one of those discussion points within Leave No Trace right now. Should we be minimizing our colors and that outdoors to sort of blend in more? And of course, with AdventureSmart and SAR, you want to be able to see people out there if you're in a rescue situation. You want to be visible. It's quite important. So I think in that one, you really got to think about the situation you're going into, and you need to have bright colors on, perhaps in hunting season, for example. Or is it better not to make that a big deal and just go out what you're comfortable in and not worry about whether you're wearing a bright color? So those are our 7 principles. I should say too that we do engage with Indigenous groups. We're doing a lot with Indigenous folks in Ontario right now. We'd like to be able to do more, but we do have limited resources, and when it comes up, we're only too ready to work with Indigenous people. And if you check our website, you will find there's a page there dedicated to reconciliation. One thing that I must state here is that we absolutely do not wish to impede or intrude on or overstate existing practices within our indigenous communities. Leave No Trace is a guideline for outdoor recreation outdoors. And we know that, of course, historically Indigenous nations have their own way across Canada and around the world, for that matter, of how they use the outdoors. And that is their prerogative, and we recognize that. To find out more about Leave No Trace, we are reasonably active in social media. We're working on improving our communications. It's something that, as a nonprofit and with minimal staff, is an ongoing challenge. We are just in the process now of hiring a new admin for our Montreal office, and one of their major functions will be communications. If you want to get back to us on any points raised here today, or follow up, or would like to volunteer with us perhaps, or inquire about volunteering, we are looking for some board members at the moment. You can reach out to us at info@leavenotrace.ca. And of course, we always appreciate new members or donations. If any of you represent organizations that are not partners of ours right now, I hope you might consider that. There are benefits to being a partner, notably downloadable resources from our website, which, thanks to folks like Dan, are improving daily. And we have a set of videos that Scott might make available to you through a link, but they're on our website. They're a lot of fun, and they were produced thanks to Mountain Equipment Company just 2 years ago. If your organization would like a workshop with Leave No Trace, we can do a virtual presentation that would go into a little more detail than what you saw tonight. We don't charge for these. Donation would be appreciated, but that's something that we can talk about. And again, just reach out to us at our info email address. So in closing, we like to say that when you do leave no trace, you show you care. You show you care for folks around you, you care for the future, you care for the users of your trail, your campsite, and our beautiful outdoors that we have here in Canada. I thought appropriate to take a clip here of those youth backpacks. That is a program run by the Sierra Club of Canada called Wild Child Forest School, which we support. And this is a marvelous exposure for young people outdoors. And from my experience, they do a great job in making sure they leave no trace when they're finished. Well, that's about it for tonight, folks, from our end. We were given about 40 minutes here, and I think I may have come back a little bit early, but I believe Sandra and Scott, there's time now for discussion. And if you want to go back, anybody, and deal with any of these slides or principles, we can do a reverse here and bring those up for you very quickly.
Marvelous. Actually, for right now, I'm going to turn off so that everyone can see you all up in full screen there, but we can always go back to the slides if we need to. We have a bunch of questions, so we're good to go, and let's get to them. There was one person who's asking, do you have connections with, I guess, scouting and Girl Guides and stuff like that? Is there some kind of program that you can use to go into the youth, the different youth groups, and teach them the principles of Leave No Trace?
Okay, great question. Scouts Canada is one of our partners. Girl Guides of Canada does use Leave No Trace in some ways, depending on where they're based, but we don't have anything formal with them at this time. Girl Guides is rebuilding in Canada, and we hope to bring them on maybe later this year. So with Scouts, they don't have a Leave No Trace badge as such that I'm aware of. But again, it depends on the group. Some groups are more active than others. We have done workshops at their I forget what they call it. They've got a special name for their some of their conferences that they do. And we've done some workshops with them on the ground there in Ontario.
Jamborees?
No, I know Jamboree. No, it's not. It's something else. It's something a little different. Anyway, the best way to if you do a search for Scouts Canada and Leave No Trace, I think you'll find that there's activities that come up for scouting. But this is, we hope, going to be one of the spin-offs of our Ontario pilot, where we're training teachers to intern teach high school students, where they in turn are going into the community, working with elementary schools and other youth groups, and doing some Leave No Trace games and activities for their extracurricular. And this is already working. We have our first group of students going into the community coming up this spring. And scouting could be the same way, where scouts leaders could take their, I don't know, what do you call them now, Dan? Are they troops or companies?
Yeah,
What,
troops.
yeah,
Troops.
right. And train them in Leave No Trace, and they in turn could take those activities down a notch to the scouting group below them. So lots of potential there. So it's a work in progress.
Oh, that's great. I used to be a Cub Scout leader, so I've got lots of experience with that, and it would be great to include that into the program. There's a question I don't understand what it is, and hopefully one of you will. What is a Dakota fire hole? That's my question. And is it considered Leave No Trace? A Dakota fire hole.
How about it, Dan?
I would say no. The reason why is because you're digging two holes into the ground and disturbing the environment that you're really in, right? Again, this is where, minimizing fire impacts. It might be better to have that stove or that that dedicated fire pit on a campsite, rather than digging two holes and building a fire underground to cook and things like that. Um, yeah, you're better off just to do the a stove or dedicated fire pit than doing the Dakota fire hole.
It's interesting you mentioned I camp almost every weekend, and we have a single burner stove. And on top of that single burner stove, I got this really fancy pot. I don't, maybe I'll find the link of it before we get to the end of the meeting, but probably not. But this really fancy pot, and it's specifically designed to be put on one of these any kind of stove, and I can boil 2 liters of water in 5 minutes, which is a ridiculously quick amount of time in comparison to what it used to be. Because this thing, the base of it is designed to capture all the heat that comes up, even when you're just blasting it. And it's amazing. And so I obviously it's not going to replace the concept of like having a foil dinner or anything like that. But for basics like boiling water, there are things that are much better than building a fire nowadays.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, back in the day when the foil dinner, throw it in the fire coals and enjoy your dinner after, I think are slowly diminishing, and we're going to more the dehydrated, add water
Yep.
concept of meal prep, especially in the backcountry, because you might not be in an area that you can have a fire, and to have a hot dehydrated meal. I mean, I use a jet boil all the time in the summer. A minute and a half, and I have boiling water. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think the days of that foil dinner, as great as they are slowly diminishing.
I prefer Mountain House myself. Mountain House rice and chicken is my favorite. One of the things that I do, since we're just trading camp stories on how we keep ourselves minimal here, is my wife actually cooks chicken and then slices at home, just like in the bakes chicken, slices it into little bits, puts it in a vacuum pack, and then freezes it. And that frozen vacuum pack comes with us. And then by the time we have dinner, we put it into the boiling water, right? Just with the frozen it's still in the frozen vacuum pack. It gets all heated up, and then we use the water to to rehydrate our stuff. And then we take the frozen chicken, we put it in. You get more good chicken rather than the rehydrated chicken, and you get a great meal. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, there's stasher bags now that you can do everything in, and things like that. So there's a lot of things on the market now that you can use and abuse that will minimize your footprint in the backcountry and even in the front country. I mean, those stasher bags, you can put your your gorp or whatever you want to call it trail mix into, and you've got a place to hold on to it.
Yeah.
Scott,
Had an-
I see there's some questions there that came up in the Q&A.
Yep, that's what we're going through.
Okay. If there's a bunch of cairns that aren't being used for trail navigation, do you
Do you
recommend
recommend pulling them down? Yeah.
pulling them down? Yeah. I would say yes, if you can find a good place to, to distribute the rocks carefully. Yeah, I mean, they don't need to be there in the next, because when people come in and they see a situation like that, there's a tendency to build more. Okay,
Yep.
I'm gonna leave my mark too, all right? Right, and it certainly happens, and again, as I mentioned the Yukon earlier, and it is an issue up there in a lot of places where folks like, or in the north in general, folks like to add those cairns, and no, not a good thing. Another question up here, what's the best way to clean up after a fire so others don't try to make a fire there again? You ever done that, Dan? I know I have.
I kind of have. I've
Kinda
left
have.
the
Okay.
rock ring, but I haven't really done the full meal deal.
So it depends what you're finding. Are you finding a ring of rocks where there's already been a fire and there's ash and everything else in there? Because that's a bigger production than just finding us like a small site where someone didn't bother with the rocks and just build a fire on top of the duff or whatever. So, which is the situation that I found. And what I did was, first of all I couldn't pack out the logs in that had burned. I had to leave them. So I just carefully placed them around in the woods where they're not easy to be seen, out of the way. And I was able to collect some of the ashes in that, and I did take some of those out. And then I replaced what was there with small amounts of duff from nearby that moving it around didn't have any impact on what was already there. I could see that. And when I was done, you really didn't know there'd been a fire. All right.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. Like if
That's right.
it depends on the
there's not one
situation.
answer that fits that lines up perfectly with that one. And the other, more on fires. Sorry, I missed it. Do you have a wood burning? If you have a wood burning stove, what are you supposed to do with the ashes?
So those are rocket stoves.
Rocket stoves, yep. There's lots like those cairn, the Colander stove we showed, the elevated stoves. First of all, they generate very little ash to start with. If you use the right kind of wood, all right, you should be able to get rid of most of your fuel. But in terms of ashes, Dan, what do you like to do?
I generally burn to gray, basically until they fall apart, and then after that, it's spread around. I don't just dump it in a pile. I generally go for a little bit of a walk, and I generally just kind of fluff it
Sprinkle
around.
it.
And
Yeah, there
yeah,
really is. That's right. There really isn't very much when you're using these devices. I mean, Scott, you talked about a high efficiency wood stove you had, and I'll bet there's hardly any ash at all when that's finished.
Quite.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you can also go with gas stoves, which have absolutely none at all.
There you
Right?
go.
It's the other option.
Which is what in most cases, which is what we recommend. And if you're carrying some kind of a dirt bag, a wag bag, what have you, you can put your ashes in there and take them out, and just put that bag in your pack, and away you go.
You had another question. This is from Facebook Live, so you don't see it on your Q&A. But they asked if you're out and you have like a snow cave or a snow kitchen and avalanche pit and seats, and you've made yourself a snow castle. What are you supposed to do when you're done?
Go ahead,
I
Dan.
I would honestly, I would leave it in place. Reason being is it's one location that people can use. Reason being is you're not affecting the environment, in a big environment. Like it's one location that people can use over and over again, and it's one footprint being disturbed, vice having numerous snow caves across the way, right? So my sense in this instance is I would leave it in place. I would obviously mark it somehow so people know it's there. But yeah, I would leave it in place. That way it minimizes the footprint and other people can use it, just like backcountry in the summer, having a big location that people can kind of correlate together and cook and things like that. That's my idea for the winter months.
Yeah, and it's probably there's probably more specific depending on what situation you find yourself in. Sandra, did you have any thoughts on that one?
I did. I know we've had some incidents here on the south coast of BC in the local mountains that are easily accessible by all levels of enthusiasts. And some have gone out and dug snow caves, made wonderful lunch kitchens and avi pits. For those who aren't familiar, that's digging a pit in the snow to assess it for avalanche danger and looking at the snow layers. Ideally, we have recommended to fill them based on, I believe it was a couple winters ago, there were some enthusiasts that were using that slope and actually fell into the kitchen.
Yeah.
Actually, the kitchen setting, if you will, really just it was a hole in the snow. And what we've heard from other guides as well, depending on the location, and what we've kind of encouraged is that after you've used it and enjoyed it, is to fill it back in and to prevent something like that from happening. If someone's walking along, the weather might change, the visibility could alter, and you're not sure what you're stepping over or into. And that was a skier coming over and they fell into that. So easily after digging a snow pit, we ask you to fill for those reasons that it needs to be left as natural as possible, even though you've just dug a pit in the snow. We're instructed in courses to fill those, and we suggest, based on the locations that we're familiar with, is to fill those maybe in other areas where it's definitely wide open in an alpine set, in a meadow setting where it's visible. But just be conscious also of the weather that might come in. And we know for sure in some areas of North Vancouver, as one example, man, it can get socked in quickly and you can't see past your nose,
Yeah,
let
and I'm
alone
sure
falling into a hole in the snow.
I'm sure if you're coming from a place where they have like you're at a cabin and you have your Cub Scout group there, and you make it, and then you come back the next weekend, that's perfectly fine, right? I don't think anyone's worried about that. I think it's more like if you're going out to um, Wendy Thompson Hut and you at the little meadow that's partway across, where people could actually like literally fall in because they didn't know it was there as you're walking across the thing. So it is going to be specific to the location that you are in for sure. Well, there's one other question that I saw. Just grab it up here. On the trails, we were chatting in the chat there a bit about trails getting wider, and you'd mentioned that as well, Richard. One person had suggested that well, what if it's just too muddy? Like my foot goes straight in. And I wanted to sort of throw this over to you, Sandra, which talks to me a bit about what we call the trip planning, which is one of our first of the 3 T's. And maybe it's not the right place to be going if you can't, if it's so muddy that you can't put your foot in and take your foot out.
Are we starting with me, Scott?
Yeah, go for it, Sandra.
We ask before you leave the house to check conditions, don't we? We talk a lot about that in all of our trip planning phases. Dan and Richard mentioned it as well. It's part of their 7 principles. So looking ahead to what the conditions are, no matter the season, and checking in with land manager updates, trail reports, parks, regional, municipal, national, seeing what's accessible, see what might be hazardous or closed or rough conditions due to poor weather. You know, the Juan de Fuca Trail on the West Coast, muddy. I think almost all the time. The systems roll through there like the drop of a hat, and it's a thick walk through. We've done a trail video on it actually, and it's, man, it's just getting suctioned into the almost every step. So knowing what you're getting into, which Richard mentioned in the 7 principles in the plan ahead, and be prepared for what's coming is key. And sometimes we really encourage you to think about maybe there's other options on where you could go, either another park, another trail, maybe there's another route that's close to that one that might be drier in this case, or saving it for another time of year. right? The systems are changing climate-wise, and maybe we can't go the same times we've been used to going for years after years after years as the systems change for all activities, right? If it's wildfires, if it's muddy conditions, if it's closures, if it's avalanches, if it's flooding. So that climate piece is really starting to surface more in our conversations, in our webinars, and in industry.
Richard, do you have,
here's-
sorry, go ahead.
I'm gonna comment on the muddy trail thing because it's something that I come across here all the time. These are guidelines, right? And if you come up to, and maybe you can't foresee what you're getting into. If you're on a known system where you've got wet conditions, absolutely. If you're in the rainforest, you know you're probably gonna get wet trails. But there's sometimes we come across a puddle or a flooding situation that we didn't see. And maybe you don't know how deep that puddle is, right? Well, we're not saying you should, we're not crazy at Leave No Trace. We're not telling you to walk through and put yourself at risk or go in up to your neck, right? Certainly, if you're going to be at risk, then you have to go around, okay? All we ask is that, and recommend, is that you consider what you're doing and realize that it may have an impact if you're creating a new trail going around it, if in fact you could go through it. Maybe what you need is one of our Leave No Trace boots that are put out there by Keen Canada. Plug for the sponsor. I know they'd love me they'd love to hear that, but there's lots of good waterproof boots out there now, and they actually work. Unlike not that long ago when I found they didn't work so good. I've got a couple of pairs that I'm amazed what I can go through now.
Better than pole vaulting, which is what I used to do as a kid. You just put the pole in it.
Well,
And
that's
as a park ranger, I could not live without my gaiters, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
So they
Yep.
went with me every day, every trek. So yeah, there's ways to get through it and keep your feet comfortably and dry, and knowing injury is the #1 incident for search and rescue in the province of BC based on data. If that slips, trips, and falls, it's lower extremities. We know this based on stats. That could be in the mud or elsewhere, right? And so being prepared with the right footwear, like Richard mentioned, and the gear can make or break your ankle, really, I guess.
Very last question. I don't know if Daniel or Richard want to take this one, but any tips for people who are using mountain bikes?
I would say that I'm only qualified to speak to certain things with mountain bikes, so I don't want to get in over my head here. But I own 3 bikes. One of them is certainly a mountain bike. I think the main thing there is, there's so many things to consider, but that's an open-ended general question, right? Are you on a dedicated mountain bike trail and encounter hikers, right? Was the trail built by your local mountain bike association? And there's you coming up on somebody walking their dog. I mean, there's so many situations that involve mountain bikes, all right? And what you should and shouldn't be doing. The main thing that, I would default to, and Dan, I invite you to comment on this as well, is staying with Principle 2, travel and camp on durable surfaces, and staying on the trail that you've built there for your bikes or that someone else has built. Beyond that, I don't think I would say a whole lot. Dan, would you like to pump in there?
Just say do your homework. Make sure that trail is suitable for the mountain bikes. And then I know in Ontario there's mountain bike, associations that are on Facebook, and they do routine trail updates, and they say, hey, this trail's not suitable for mountain bikes right now. It's too wet, or it's roots are above ground line, things like that. So do your homework. Again, it's trail prep. It's being ready and knowing your terrain before you go out. And when you get out there, if you start going down the trail, and it's not a great trail, stop and turn around. Don't get yourself in a position where you're stuck or you're going to get injured. And again, you're going to set up yourself for a SAR extract or, something like that. Yeah, it's common sense approach. I mean, these are only guidelines, like Richard said. In the end of the day, it's trail prep, and it's prep for yourself to go out there in the backcountry and the forecountry.
I love that a reference back to the mountain biking clubs. Those clubs have lots of programs like Ride, Don't Slide and other things like that. And definitely, if you can get mentors from a club that is long standing in your area, you're going to be set up for success. We're going to do a quick video, and then when we come back from that, we're going to do some giveaways. Sound good? Let's give it a slide.
So, you want to be adventure smart.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
But what is being adventure smart?
Being adventure smart is really all about taking responsibility for your own safety and following the 3 T's.
Got it. What are the 3 T's?
What are the 3 T's? The 3 T's are the trifecta of outdoor safety: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. The 3 T's can vary from person to person, activity to activity, and season to season. But here are some important ways to ensure you are prepared and safe on your next adventure. Trip planning. We could go on forever about this one. Trip planning is an essential step and one of the easiest ways we can stay safe on our adventures. This is something that should be done every time we head into the outdoors, whether for a few hours or multiple days. Trip planning can be broken down into 4 simple steps. Planning your travel route and navigation is about picking a trail or route based on its difficulty that's relative to your experience, ability, and the amount of time you have. Know your limits. Not all trails are created equal, so know the terrain and conditions. A 10-kilometer hike scrambling straight up a steep mountain is a lot different than a 10-kilometer stroll around a lake. Before you go anywhere, check the weather and keep checking it as things can change fast. This includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and sunset times. Finally, make sure you leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. Keep in mind, this may not be your mom or dad or best buddy. Choose someone you can count on if you were to get into trouble. A comprehensive trip plan might be as simple as sending your trusted contact a text or email with key information about your activity, or using the AdventureSmart app, which allows you to enter a detailed trip plan. Training doesn't mean being an elite athlete or being queen of the mountain on Strava. Training is a continuous process of outdoor recreation. It's about developing the necessary skills and abilities to be safe. This might include working your way up to that big summit hike, taking a few courses to expand your wilderness and backcountry knowledge, navigation and route finding courses, or even learning more advanced skills like rescue and emergency training. You have planned and trained. Now make sure you take the essentials. Taking the essentials means packing everything you potentially need to stay warm, safe, and dry if an emergency unexpectedly arises. What if you rolled your ankle or got hurt? What if you got lost and had to spend the night outdoors? Take the time and be prepared to look after yourself. So that's it. Those are the 3 T's.
That's it.
But no matter how hard you train, how well you trip plan, and how much essential gear you bring, you may still find yourself in an emergency. And that's okay. The wilderness can be unpredictable. If you find yourself in an emergency, it's important to stop, think, observe, and plan. Use that essential gear you brought to stay warm, dry, and safe, and contact 911 on your emergency communication device. Remember, search and rescue in BC is free for everyone. Remember, safety is an outcome of good trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. It's your responsibility. So let's all do our part and be adventure smart.
Da, 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 da.
Thank you. We've heard that a few times this winter, and we're going to hear it a few times this summer as we move into our next webinar series. But as we wrap this evening's, I'd like to offer a few giveaways. Thanks, Richard. It was great. It was insightful, educational, great reminders. Those principles are never a harm to go through again. Dan, thanks for your insights and input, and good luck with the bears out there. Avoid them at all costs, please. And we wanted to offer our enthusiasts who were here tonight, who took the time to get informed and help themselves have great adventures and help search and rescue by being so considerate of your preparation. A couple questions here. The first prize we'd love to offer is from our guest this evening via Coleman. It's a Coleman headlamp, which sounds very exciting, hands-free. is always good, no matter what you're doing. I found this one interesting, and it was really helpful for me to learn. Richard had talked about the type of wood that you should use to create a fire. So please answer the question in the chat to Scott. The first one to let me know the 4 types of description of wood you should use to have a fire, you'll win this Coleman headlamp. So he
I'll
talked
give
about
you a hint. It's the 4
diff-
Ds.
The 4 Ds. That's a good hint. That's a big hint. And I paid close attention to that when you were talking about it, Richard. It was very helpful.
Marvelous.
So
And we've got someone. That's superb. Thank you. We're going to get back in touch with people on the email address they registered for here. So keep an eye, but we do have our winner. Thank you.
wonderful. The second prize is from Reco, and it's an excellent detachable reflector, and it helps you be searchable. We can help you more about learn a little bit more about that as we move along here. But the question for this has to come from our video. So if you're paying a close attention there, can you tell us what the second T is in our 3 Ts? We repeat them in a certain order. Oh, nice. It's always good
There
to
you
see.
go. And we've got it. We've already got our response from that one. Marvelous. The answer, of course, being training.
And the last offer is another light source. This one is from our sponsor, Bright Source. They've been gracious all winter, offering prizes every webinar. This one is also in relation to Leave No Trace as we take care of ourselves out there and as we go out for hikes and bikes. And I love the question about mountain biking. Thank you. I'm an avid one and appreciated that to end the questions. This one is around emergencies. You know, we plan ahead, we follow the principles. Hopefully we take the pledge. I encourage you to take the pledge with Leave No Trace. Can someone tell me what our STOP acronym stands for? It was in the video. It was right near the end. Oh, I can feel people thinking.
Ta-da!
Very good.
But you know what? That person already has won tonight. I'm not going to give her twice. Let's just see someone else can come up with it.
Sorry.
We're
I'm
gonna
paying attention though.
Yeah, we're gonna give someone else a chance. So this is what you need to do in the event that you get into an emergency situation. We want you to stop, and that stands for, the first one is stop, and then the second one is P, starts with a T, and then O and P. There we go. Da-da-da-da.
You
We've got
really
got the
helped them
answers.
into that one, Scott. That was very kind of you, kind of us. We really helped him out. Wonderful. As we conclude, thanks for sticking around for a few extra minutes to get through our webinar and watch the video, hear the questions, play our games, win some prizes. And as we close the winter series, thanks to everyone who's joined us this evening for getting informed on behalf of the 3,400 volunteers of Search and Rescue. Scott is one of them. Thank you for all your help, Scott. And it's been a wonderful series. Stick around. We'll be announcing our summer series over the weeks ahead. I've got a few more things to wrap up, but it's looking great, by the way. Starts May 9th, runs to the beginning of August. Thank you, Dan. All the best out there. Enjoy the outdoors this spring and summer. Richard, thank you for your expertise and your time this evening.
Well, you're welcome.
Leading up to our event. If anyone has any questions, feel free to DM us on any of our socials. We're on it daily, hourly, and we're here for you. Enjoy the rest of your winter, spring, and we'll see you in summer. Good night.
Good night, everybody.